And we're back. This is the second episode of Dear Trauma, Let's Get More Acquainted, Project Heal's TV show. And today we have our second guest. Can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you?
Yeah, my name is Jasmine. I'm originally from El Paso, Texas, and moved to Las Vegas about a year and a half ago when I joined Teach for America.
Okay.
And I'm teaching 5th grade here in Las Vegas.
Excellent, excellent. And so, growing up, was conversations of like mental health, stress, and trauma had in your family?
The short answer I'd say would be no.
Okay.
And I think mostly that comes from that my parents never really had those conversations with their parents.
Mm-hmm.
And so they didn't really know, at least in what I don't think they really knew how to have those conversations in a productive and helpful way with us.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as I grew older, I think as like our struggles with like mental health or like our emotional struggles became more evident,
Mm-hmm.
I think like I definitely saw them stretch to try to have those conversations with us. And even now into adulthood, I can see them really striving to have like those conversations. We haven't really hit that point yet, but it's getting there, I think.
Yeah. So I think that like as I lead Project Heal, it's like a national trauma-informed education org. Like for me growing up, I don't remember topics of mental health or like stress or trauma like had in my family or in my household at all, right? Like, and I have like a massive family, and there's a lot of people there, and I think most of the conversation around like stress and trauma was around like people fist fighting or like somebody like getting into an accident of some sort, but nothing around like specific mental health or specific ways to express emotions or something like that. Yeah. And so you said that you came to Las Vegas as a teacher?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Yeah. I wasn't really something that I foresaw, but I had heard about Teach for America and joined after I got out of college, and this is where I was placed.
Okay. Okay, perfect. Yeah, so I joined Teach for America in 2013 as a core member, taught middle school English, and also like joined staff later in 2017 and worked on the alumni team as well.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so like since we are both teachers, do you think the conversation around mental health, stress, and trauma is a necessary conversation to have amongst teachers in Las Vegas?
Absolutely, yes. I think our students evidently are going through traumatic experience. They're going through different struggles. And I think too often we treat those situations kind of like as an elephant in the room. Like we know that it's there, but at least for myself, for the first year and even part of this year of teaching, I didn't really know how to address it, which was one of the reasons why I became interested in Project Heal. And even though I haven't really I definitely don't tackle that in the way that I would think is ideal. I do feel like I'm getting there.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to continue learning about how to have those conversations with my colleagues and with my students as well.
Yeah. I think as I was thinking about like one of the first questions you answered around like how we were brought up in our upbringing to talk about stress, trauma, and mental health, I think depending on how we were like raised determines how we choose to have those conversations in our classroom.
Yeah.
And I think that like since many of those conversations weren't had with me as like a young boy, I didn't really know how to have conversations around stress, trauma, or even mental health in my classroom, which prompted me to want to learn more around mental health, stress, and trauma for myself first, and then to further educate my students.
Right. No, yeah, I feel that like 100% because as I've learned more through Project Heal, I've really had to unlearn some of the tactics that I was using. I feel like I've had to double back a lot. And now, knowing what I know now, I saw a lot what I was doing, which is jumping to conclusions and not really digging deeper to see like what the root cause was. Because that's how it was done at my house. You did something wrong, that's what is addressed. It's not, okay, well, did something happen when you were playing with your siblings? Did you have a bad day at school? And so I've learned some what I think are more productive ways to help our students with their goals and the goals that we have set for them as well.
Yeah, no, most definitely. And I think that like for me growing up in Chicago around like a lot of strong men, strong women, like oftentimes they would, a lot of my family members would say like, don't cry, little Johnny. But family, if you hear me, I like say crying is a healthy thing. and not a weak thing, because it's literally our body's way of releasing like stress, to the point where in which we're overwhelmed, our body literally releases toxins through tears. And so crying is healthy, family and everyone who's listening. But you continue to talk more about like your upbringing, your time experience as a teacher, and then you associated with Project Heal, and that was the point where in which you grew more interested in our programming. And so what was it that actually inspired you to join the Teach for America Las Vegas Project Heal Trauma Informed Education pathway?
Yeah, so I feel like my interest there was like 3 phases to it. So like first was like TFA had talked to us about the different pathways that they were offering for this year, and I kind of just read through each of the missions, and the one that stood out the most to me was Project Heal. And then a little bit after that, I hadn't really made any like steps towards being a part of the pathway at that point. But in TFA we have MTLDs, which are kind of like coaches that help us with our 2 years in Teach for America. And based on the conversations that I had with my coach and the concerns that I had brought to them, and kind of like the goals that I was trying to work towards, they had suggested to me Project Heal because they thought that it would be helpful with what I was going through. So I was like, okay, well, this would be a good time to apply to that, and I'm glad I did.
Yes. No, I think it's extremely important to have these conversations with Teach for America and further converse with coaches on staff to talk about how can we get more first and second year teachers understanding how trauma impacts them, and then also how trauma may impact their students and parents and caregivers. And so you participated in the Project Heal Trauma Informed Education pathway, and so I'm curious to know more about what new information did you take away from the pathway, new mindsets or new skills?
Yeah. So first and foremost, I would say learning about the history of trauma and how what implications like that trauma can bring out, and then also learning about different resources that we can use with our students and for ourselves to help them and help ourselves talk through what we're dealing with, so that we understand ourselves better, so that we can work through those issues to continue moving forward, I think. Yeah. And so the resources were really helpful in that way. I think just learning more about myself. I feel like through the training I've learned more about myself, and I'm like, okay, well maybe I do this because of this, and I can move on from that by using this mechanism. And then being able to be in a position to use those things to help my students as well.
Certainly. What do you feel like you've walked away with skills that you have now that you didn't have before?
Definitely. I think one of the parts in Project Heal that I really liked was looking at the different scenarios, because there's scenarios that I feel like I've seen in my classroom as well. Even in an elementary classroom, a lot of those situations are applicable, and I was able to see in like the traditional ways that those kinds of situations are handled. I saw a lot of what I was doing.
Right.
And in the like Project Heal method, I saw 1 or 2 things that I'm doing, but it gave me a lot more ideas of how to handle those situations when I see them in my classroom moving forward. Yeah,
I think one of the most memorable moments in our trauma from education experience was when we talked about the demographics of like Latino people, Native Americans, like Black African Americans, and then also like Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, and how the different mental health issues impacted communities differently. I think that moment, like digging deep into the content, like really exposed us to a lot of similarities and a lot of differences, right? The similarities between like Latino men, older Latino men, and like older Black men, and how they present stoic but may actually be suffering from a number of mental health illnesses. And I think that conversation lent a lot to our ability to recognize the humanity around different cultures and our struggle with expressing ourselves emotionally and navigating stress and trauma, like pre-COVID, during COVID, and even today. Yeah.
No, I feel that because I don't know. During that session, like in a way, I felt validated, especially looking at the data behind, as a Latina, and looking at some of that data. It made me realize, or helped me feel seen. Like it wasn't just me that a lot of people in my community probably going through the same things, and it kind of sets a tone for, I don't know, of support.
Yeah.
And so I really appreciated that session, and looking at and being able to understand a little bit more about different cultures. And there was a lot of surprising things that I didn't know before that I think definitely helps me in my strategy in my classrooms in the future.
Excellent. And so in the trauma-informed education pathway, we were intentional in designing it so that it was, on the one end, trauma-informed education, but then on the other end, it also offered an opportunity for a healing experience. And so each participant was offered a healing experience. And so which healing experience did you select?
Yes, I chose the massage.
Okay.
And so Project Heal partners with the Massage of Envy here in Las Vegas, and so I was able to have first ever massage.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's a beautiful thing. And so,
Yeah.
like, can you walk me through how you were feeling the week before your massage, and then tell me how you felt during your massage and then after?
Yeah, honestly, it was a rough week. I had finals week for my master's program. It's great. Like, we're in the last 2 weeks of teaching before winter break, and so kids are excited, and it's been hard to manage that as well, along with other experiences that I've been struggling with since moving here in Las Vegas. And so I was having that healing experience was something that I was looking forward to the whole week. And then once I had it, like once I was able to take part in that experience, like it was the first time in a while that I've been able to relax without feeling guilty for relaxing. And so all I had to do was close my eyes, listen to the music, and just smell like the lavender in the air and just chill out. And so I was really appreciative for that moment, because it wasn't something that I was able to lean into for a long time.
Yeah.
I feel.
Yeah. So if there was one emotion that you would use to describe the week leading up to your healing experience, what would it be?
I would say, I would just say chaotic, probably. Yeah. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. And if there was one emotion that you would choose to describe your healing experience, what would it be?
I'd say restorative.
And how did you feel following the healing experience?
I feel like it's been something that helped me like center. Like even though it was earlier this week, like if I'm getting into like a moment where I'm like feel myself like stressing out, I just have to think of like that hour and a half, just think of that music and how I felt in that moment, and I feel like it's helped me center even throughout this day. And so yeah, I think that's how I would describe how that's helped me so far.
Perfect. No, that sounds good. And I think that's extremely important, considering like what we're talking about is mental hygiene, right? And in our previous episode, I alluded to the fact that on a daily basis, we focus on our physical hygiene. We wake up, it's common practice to brush our teeth, wash our face, fix our hair, and dress up and look nice. But it's almost countercultural to practice making our mental hygiene a priority. And so you emphasizing the very fact that going into a 90-minute massage beforehand was chaotic, and then going there, it was soothing, calming, restorative, and then shortly thereafter, you were able to use that massage experience as a point of reference to feel centered, and more specifically, to feel grounded. Right? That's you practicing mental hygiene, cleansing your mental hygiene. And so, like, my question in regards to like mental hygiene is, do you think that if you incorporated a massage into your schedule every 2 weeks, that would support your mental hygiene?
I think so, and I think finding additional and other feasible like mechanisms, I think would be really helpful, because I think for a while I have kind of like ignored that kind of aspect to address like my mental health. And so I think it's really important to have, whether it be a massage or to have like just a few hours where I can just read and not worry about anything else or any other thing that helps me to de-stress, I think is important.
Excellent. And so, like, we talked about the trauma-informed education component of the trauma-informed education pathway, and we talked about the healing component of the trauma-informed education pathway. And so with that being said, would you recommend the Teach for America Las Vegas trauma-informed education experience to other teachers?
Yeah, 1,000%. I feel like even with like the 3 short sessions that we've had since the beginning of the semester, I feel like I've been able to make actual changes, as however small they may be, actual changes that I feel like have improved my classroom and improved my my instruction moving forward. I think I've been able to move from just being super overwhelmed and not knowing how to talk with my students to having actual practices in mind that I can refer to when planning on having certain different kinds of conversations with my kids in the classroom.
Good deal. And so I'm curious, because we had 3 sessions, and session 1 was focused on trauma and historical trauma. Session 2 was focused on trauma and student learning. And then session 3 was focused on trauma and supporting students through emotional regulation. Which session spoke to you the most?
I would say the second session. I think one of the resources that you had introduced was the emotion wheel.
Oh yes.
And even though I feel like that might be a lot at first for my 5th graders, it definitely gave me a point of reference that I can look at and that I could adjust so that it could be something that they can understand and that they can use in a productive way. And that was also the session where we had looked at the different data of the different culture groups. And so that as well gave me something to think about when I am approaching my students and trying to help them work through their difficulties in a helpful way.
Yeah, and I think to just like synthesize like the theme of our conversations is that as teachers and educators, it's extremely important to advance a student's academic intelligence, but it's simultaneously like so important to advance their emotional intelligence and like make it an intentional effort, right? Not have it be a byproduct of something that we think we should be doing, but make it just as important as studying for standardized tests.
Yep.
Right? And so as we prepare to close our conversation, do you have any questions for me?
I would say, or I would ask, I guess, when you were in the classroom, knowing what you know now, what would be some of the things that you would have changed in the way that you worked with your kids?
Yeah, so contrary to popular belief, like I made a lot of mistakes, and also I didn't always have a trauma-informed perspective, and so I think that I would ask my students every single day that they came into my classroom to like complete an emotional assessment so that I know how they're feeling before they come into my classroom, and then assess how they're feeling at the conclusion of my class so that I can maintain a consistent pulse of how they're feeling and how I impact or whether I enhance their mood or make them feel bad, right? Because the reality of the circumstance is that like I could easily hurt people's feelings unintentionally, but I think that that's just the grace that I and teachers are given within the confines of healthy relationships or attempting to build healthy relationships with students. And so I would say that I would want my students to let me know how they're feeling every single day before they come into before I start a lesson, and when I close a lesson, to let them know that I am being intentional around how they're feeling and how they're learning academically, but also how they're learning emotionally. Yeah.
I don't think I have any other questions.
Yeah. All good.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. So, I mean, thank you so much for joining us on the Project Heal TV show to get more acquainted with stress, trauma, and collective healing. This is Project Heal. We're closing up with our 2nd episode. Thank you so much, Jasmine, for joining us. Remember to feel good, live better. Project Heal.